Right. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on which time zone you're in. My name is Shiva Sasarla. I'm the founder of Circular Cities Asia. We are a knowledge platform for urban circular economy. And the idea is to promote conversations and knowledge and innovation, hopefully, around circular economy in cities, generally in Asia, but we all have the same issues globally. Today, we are talking about designing zero waste food places, right? It's a very unique perspective, and I'm super excited and proud to host this Power Pack panel today. And I'll quickly introduce all of them, introduce the Singapore context, and I'll invite my colleague Simon to introduce the Hong Kong context. He's logging in from Hong Kong. And then we'll pass the conversation on to Claire, who's logging in from New York City. She's the founder of the Center for Zero Waste Design. And she's going to pick the minds of this amazing panel we have. We have Christina, the CEO of Foodprint Group, also from New York. We have Chiung, who's from Singapore. And then we have Hakan, from the Rosewood Hotels Group. He is actually in a very odd time zone, but he's stayed up to speak with us. It's in Turkey. I think it's 3 a.m. for him, but he's stayed up to join this panel. Thank you so much, Hakan, for doing this. Super excited, and over the next hour or so, I think we'll have some amazing takeaways from the conversation here. Let me start off by talking about food waste in Singapore, right? So food waste has grown at an alarming rate in Singapore. In 2019, an NEA here formally acknowledged the issue and identified food waste as one of the top 3 concerns, along with packaging waste and e-waste, as a significant contributor to the problem of the booming food waste problem here in Singapore. So in Singapore, obviously, we have one landfill, and we incinerate all our waste, compact it, and try and pack the ash in that landfill. And originally, the landfill was designed to last much longer, but given how food waste rates have increased, the landfill's life seems to be much shortened, which is cause for concern, obviously, here. Food waste is a big contributor in the household sector, as well as in the commercial and food service sector as well. A lot of that food waste, ladies and gentlemen, is classified as avoidable food waste. So the NEA recognizes avoidable and unavoidable food waste. And avoidable is food waste is waste that could have been consumed or better managed. And in other words, totally unnecessary, right? So there's been a lot of conversations around food waste in 2019 and 2020 as well. There's some new legislation coming up as well. Just to summarize what has happened, in Singapore from 2024 onwards, large commercial and industrial food waste generators will be required to segregate their food waste for treatment. This includes hotels, malls, food manufacturers, food caterers, cloud kitchens, and so on. Starting this year, all new developers and architects, and we'd love to hear from Chi-Yung on this, all developers of new properties here are expected to allocate and set aside space for on-site food treatment, right? So it's going to affect how buildings are designed, how buildings are managed. It's a very important issue, guys. There've been a lot of interventions in the last couple of years. Technology, advocacy, research, public campaigns. Today, we are offering a very new perspective to food waste management. How can buildings be designed better for food waste management? It's less about technology, although we can't escape technology is very integral, but it's less about advocacy, less about research. It's about how intelligent design can promote better food waste management practices. And I can't wait to hear this amazing panel. I'll stop here. Simon, I'll request you to set the Hong Kong context and then we can invite Claire to take over. Thank you so much, everybody. Looking forward to learning from all of you.
Thank you, Shiva. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Simon.
Okay, excellent. Now, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I mean, it's amazing. You know, I think it's one of the positive point due to COVID-19, because then we now use Zoom and other online platform for events and meetings, and we can bring people together from different parts of the world. Even though Hakan, for example, you have to stay up late to join us, but I think we are all glad and happy to be able to have that opportunities to talk about this important issue, food waste, and how we can, as Shiva mentioned, intelligently try to help with the problem by better design. But let me share with you the situation in Hong Kong in the interest of those who are not living in Hong Kong. Now, food waste, as in Singapore, in Hong Kong is a major problem. I think the government has long acknowledged the issue is a big challenge. And in 2014, they put together, a food waste plan. So, on the screen, you can see there's a 4-step strategy. We talk about reduction at source. So we have a Foodwise Hong Kong campaign that would encourage people to order less, to finish the food. If they can't, just take it home. Or if not, then they can donate, which is the second point, to donate and to help others. And thirdly, there's always a challenge in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong, even though food waste issue is a big one, but in terms of scale, actually is a small scale. We do not create a lot of food waste compared to other cities. So if we are to transport our food waste or to collect our food waste, actually the cost to do so is quite high. And the government, put together some plan starting from 2018 to collect food waste from different locations and from different premises, including commercial businesses, including restaurants, schools, and also residential areas. So it helps to collect food waste and to send them to what we call the Old Park. We have one Old Park now, we call it Old Park 1. This is a food waste treatment facility with a capacity of roughly 200 tons per day. Of course, we are creating much more than that, but at least as an infrastructure support, we have our first Old Park, and the government is already building the second one, and it will become operational in the next 2 years. But one point I want to share is by collecting all these food waste, actually, we are trying to turn that into energy. So it's like a waste to energy concept. So it will not only reduce food waste that's going to landfill, but also provide some renewable energy for Hong Kong, which is always energy thirsty. And that's why, with this strategy, I can tell you the amount of food waste that's being created per person per day has gone down slightly, which is encouraging. But I think also if you look at the pie chart, which shows the amounts of food waste going to landfills, we are now down to 30%. Now, if you compare different waste stream, food waste is still the biggest one. But in terms of percentage and also actual volume, it's been reduced in the last few years. So I think we are moving into the right direction. The government has provided a good strategy, and actually just before Chinese New Year, which is February, the government also put together a new blueprint for waste management in Hong Kong. And the vision is to achieve waste reduction, resource circulation, and also very important, zero landfill by 2035. And to do that, we have to be smart and we have to be diligent in terms of how we collect and manage food waste in Hong Kong. And for that reason, I really look forward to the panel today, because it's less about how to treat food waste at the tail end. Actually, it's how to address the issue at the front end. That is by smart design in terms of buildings, in terms of F&B premises and facilities. And we have experts from Hong Kong, New York City, and also Singapore to give us all the tips. So I really look forward to the conversation as the audience. And so I will stop here and I will pass it on to Claire Mifflin from New York City Center for Zero Waste Design. Mifflin, Claire, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Simon. Yes, let me share my screen. Welcome, everybody, and thank you to the Hong Kong Design Trust for supporting this project, which is Zero Waste Design Guidelines for High Density Cities. Can you see my screen okay? Great. So this is a collaborative project, realizing that New York City, Hong Kong, and Singapore are all high density. They all have set various zero waste plans, although I have to say New York City is not really on track to reach its goal of zero waste to landfill, but all have instituted various measures to get there. And each city aims to reduce food waste, collecting it separately. New York City also has a rule that large generators have to separate it, reduce packaging, establish a fee-based system, and generally similar strategies really focused on policies and legislation, infrastructure, and behavior changes. But we know that although these are critical, design of our buildings in the urban realm has a crucial place to play in making these successful, which is why in New York City, we developed the Zero Waste Design Guidelines. These are a comprehensive resource to show the critical role architecture and urban planning play. And while they were written for the New York City context, the design strategies are easily adaptable to other cities. So just quickly, we developed them by really going and visiting over 40 to 50 buildings and following the path of waste from where it was set out to where it was collected. And we saw how from the design of waste stations to the procedures for moving the waste to the storage space, it was essential that these were all designed well to make sure first waste was segregated correctly and it stayed segregated all the way through collection. So we developed typologies illustrating how waste is handled in different building types. And these two down below, where there's shared storage space, give many more opportunities for tracking and reducing material usage. And so the best practice strategies really fall into these four categories. How can you reduce waste, use less single-use materials to start with, like reusable food serviceware? How can you better segregate waste? How can you plan for waste as a material flow? And then what kind of strategies you can have to reduce the volume of waste, or also the weight if we're talking about food waste. And so one thing we really looked at is equipment to process food waste and the considerations for planning those into a building. Because it's really, some of those are in a kitchen, some are outside, some are full composting and need browns or landscape materials. Some allow you to use the output on site, some collected in a tank truck. There's very many different ways that you can use your organic waste, and some are more circular than others. So we also really looked at, is there beneficial reuse of that organic waste? And if so, is it on a building scale, a neighborhood scale, or a regional scale? And here in New York City, we know we need to plan for all three scales. And then we looked at some case studies where there was circularity and composting equipment was designed into a park. Here in the small Domino Park, it collects from some residents and is managed by horticultural staff and used in the landscape. Or in a larger scale in Battery Park City, where they collect a lot of commercial food waste along with horticultural waste. They compost it in an in-vessel composter and use it for the landscape and compost tea for the lawns. And we summarized all our best practice strategies in this infographics. This one's for food service design. I kind of think of it as a wish list for everything Chris wished her clients had done when they designed the building before she gets to work on it. So yes, that's a brief overview of the Zero Waste Design Guidelines and what they are. And with this, I'll pass on to Christina Grace, who was a co-author of the guidelines, to share her insights.
Give me 1 minute to get my screen up. And hopefully this will work. There we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, happy Earth Week, everybody. And thank you so much to the Business Environment Council and Renergii and the Design Trust of Hong Kong for supporting this collaborative process. We are really, really excited to be here. Again, I'm Chris Grace. I'm the CEO at Foodprint Group. Our team at Foodprint helps companies eliminate waste through best design and operations practices, and then we provide a lot of performance management tools. Our focus is on the food and hospitality sectors. And I have to say that one of the highlights of my career has been working with Claire on the design guidelines. And we're very excited to be talking to you all about them and hoping that we can help you think about your work on the ground in Hong Kong and Singapore and other parts of Asia. So we all know waste causes climate change, it threatens public health, and it costs businesses a lot of money. So why do we have it? And what are the problems? Well, we know, and we're here to talk about design because waste is a design problem. It's a problem with the design of the stuff that we purchase in our places and the design of our physical places where we're not making it easy for people to recycle or compost or reduce waste. It's also an information problem where so many organizations, businesses, universities, hospitals, others, it's hard to know exactly how much waste we're generating every day unless we're really tracking it, which is rare. So that's where we start with our clients. But today we're going to focus mostly on design. Here, let me see. I'm a little stuck here. Huh.
Sometimes if you uncast and cast it back, it works.
Yeah, it seems like it moved. It moved. So starting from design, you know, a successful zero waste program really requires planning. And ideally, it's planning from when you're designing the building at the very, very beginning to make sure you're planning for the proper storage and flow of waste. Waste is typically handled many times between when someone puts it in their initial disposal bin all the way to when it gets picked up and collected for a circular economy, hopefully, opportunities. But in every touch point, we need to make sure that we continue the good separation that we're doing at the start in recycling places. And so we think with this, we use the design guidelines to really, really analyze the process through that cycle. And as Claire mentioned, and this was my favorite part, we talked a lot about food service, and we came up with 12 interventions that we thought would really, really make a difference in waste reduction and recycling, from something as simple as making sure that you have storage in your refrigerator for food that you may want to donate at the end of the day so that that food is eaten, all the way to front of house recycling stations and food places, to planning for yellow grease collection, to be thinking about if you have buffet service, that you are actually having smaller buffet trays so you don't have as much waste of the buffet, every little detail you could imagine, reusable dishware and so on. And all these things require space, which in our urban places comes at a premium. And we actually took a step back in the midst of COVID and re-looked at our interventions to really think how we could help people consider how they were going to incorporate health and safety into their zero waste planning. So we also we updated the design guidelines, food service infographic, and then we really dove into the details here with a kind of phase 1 where so many food places were doing takeout and delivery, and a phase 2 where we're back to dine in, but maybe we're dine in at 25% capacity. What are the things we need to think about? Who's wearing gloves now? Maybe front of house porters are wearing gloves where they weren't before, or things like where are we creating new waste and how do we handle that? These infographics are available. Our slide deck includes a list of resources, but also please reach out if there's anything that you want to know more about after the presentation. So why do we care about food places? Because when we're talking about food waste and we're talking about food and hospitality operations, whether that's a fancy restaurant, a fast casual place, or a hotel, more than 50% of the waste produced in these places is food. And most of that waste is actually coming from the back of house, which, so you see here an example. This is a fast casual restaurant with 91% of the organic waste coming from back of house. What the good news there is that we can really control what our teams do and what happens in our places much more easily than we can, say, control what our customers might do front of house. So we have an awful lot of opportunity to reduce waste in our food places. So we work with clients to think very strategically about every point where that waste is generated, and everywhere where you see green on these floor plans is some kind of organics collection, whether it's a countertop container or it's a large, what we call tote, that is going to be what ends up moving waste through the building afterwards. And I'm gonna have my faux pas of speaking in gallons, but these are generally here in the United States, 35 to 64 gallons. Will have to tell me what they are in kilos, but anyway, so we're thinking about all those points from disposal to storage, starting in the kitchens in food places, and making sure that we've planned for sufficient space. And we keep those visual cues in design. So you saw those green bins in the kitchen. Well, then when it moves from the kitchen to an interim storage area, it's still going into a green container. And then when it makes it out onto the loading dock, it's also going in a green container. And those visual cues are really important for staff, so that it's a real foolproof plan of maintaining separation of your materials if you want those organics to be composted or made into energy. And we design for reduction. So what we were talking earlier about processing food waste on site, there's lots of different ways we can do that. We can just take the water out of it through pulping or dehydrating. We prefer pulping because dehydrating uses electricity, high heat, and carbon. But there are also systems that will make fertilizer. The system you can see here on the right is an eco-rich system that is breaking down the food waste with microbes, and then the fertilizer will be used on site. And right in the middle of the bottom, it's very hard to tell, but this is actually an opening to a micro anaerobic digester. This one is being used in a grocery store in Spain. We actually have one that will be supporting a very large office building that has 8 corporate dining restaurants. And they will be making energy with their food waste that they cannot donate or otherwise serve to people. And they'll be making energy, and then they will have a liquid fertilizer at the end that we will actually take the water out of and have a solid fertilizer that will be used here in New York City. And this is a FlexiBuster is the name of the system. But there are so many interesting technologies coming on the market all the time, different kinds of biodigesters and we really we try to stay up on these because our clients are very, very interested in on-site processing due to the cost of organics processing, but also we really want to keep the beneficial nutrients in our communities. So as I was saying before, we spend a lot of time on color coding and making sure everything lines up. You look at these signs, you would never create signage for your customers that looks like this. Front of house signage is lovely and simple, may still be visual, but it's really important in kitchens that have so many different kinds of materials and where it's so easy to drop gloves in the organics or plastic wrap into the recycling, to make sure that you have very detailed visual back of house signage. And that signage carries through. So if you have a donations program, see here we have, this is at a large retail grocery store and restaurant. It's really a major food hall called Italy, where they have refrigerated donation storage here that gets picked up every day. Here to the right is a picture of the team at the food bank in Singapore coming to pick up some donated items from a grocery store. But it's very, very important that you treat donations just like you're treating your other streams, where it's separated, and even more important for donations because you have to maintain proper temperature. You have to make sure that this food remains healthy and edible from your place to a food bank or pantry where it will be used. When we're designing for reduction, we think about everything. Even the fact that often in our food places, people are dumping their full disposable coffee cups into the trash, which means you are paying to haul a lot of water, a lot of liquid. And so we want to make sure that that liquid gets poured out, ideally down a drain. Sometimes we have clients who actually have buckets in their recycling stations that they have to empty multiple times a day because these are smaller food places, and they thought about it later, so they couldn't afford to plumb the site to actually have a drain. But if you can plan, you absolutely want to make sure that your public-facing recycling stations will include, particularly when you're in a fast casual restaurant, a food hall, or other public food places where you have this liquid disposal. You see this often in coffee shops. Every Starbucks, when you usually can pour some of the coffee out if you're adding milk and there's too much. We should be doing those things everywhere, because we don't want to be hauling water around our cities. Now, even better than recycling, we want to design for reuse. So we work with our clients, and we've been talking a lot about the hawker centers in Singapore that are often using reusable dishware. They're planning for dishwashing capacity on site. We want all places to be doing that in the fast casual world. And here on the upper left is an example where our client has lovely reusable bowls for in-house dining. This is a company called Dig In, and then they have their compostable to-go bowls next to those. But they always have to make sure the reusables are front and center, or the staff will just pull a disposable dish because they're in a rush. And we also talk to our clients about, everybody uses kegs for beers behind a bar in a hotel bar or restaurant bar. But we are now seeing fabulous kegs for wine. And the more that we can use something like a aluminum keg that is reusable versus bottles that we're really struggle in many places to recycle glass. So we're talking to clients about those kinds of things. And then we have to create space for those reusables. So if you look to the right, if we have kegs, if we're sending back milk crates or other things, you have to have planned for that in your waste storage. So we really go in and are the ones who are telling our clients that they needed twice as much waste storage as they actually planned for their space. And then we really work to reduce waste to work with the space that they have. So here's an example for reusable dishware for a to-go program. This is a fast casual restaurant chain that actually has set up a program where their clients can be members of their reusable dishware program. You get your food in a clean bowl. When you come back to get more food, you drop off the dirty bowl. And our client washes all those bowls back of house. And as you can imagine, if you don't plan for that, often in these small food places, you don't have enough dishwashing capacity to be able to do that. But it's been a successful program for them. These kinds of programs have really struggled during COVID because people have been more concerned about reusable dishware, but we are really pushing our clients to get back on board with that, because as long as they are sanitizing their dishware, we are very confident that it is safe. And this is just an example of when you have a reusable dishware program, you have to think about the dishwashing. And if you see the spot in the middle, our client, who has a very vibrant corporate office reusable to-go dish program, had to figure out how to dry those dishes quickly because their dish line wasn't working. So they actually got metro shelving and a fan and created the space. They were lucky to have the square footage to do it, but it's just a reminder that you can be innovative and you can retrofit solutions for things. To the right, and I'm burying this with everybody's faces here, but this is really, really cool. There is the Hearst office building in New York City wanted to have reusable dishware, but they did not want to give over expensive mezzanine space for dishwashing. So they put dishwashing in the basement of this building, and then they created a 3-story dish conveyor to allow for people to drop off on the mezzanine where they're eating their food. And then the dishes travel all the way down in this very space efficient conveyor that we were very excited to, because the parts were actually manufactured in New York State. So it's also locally made and fabricated, which was very, very cool. All right, I'm getting this again. That seems to be something that, there we go. And here's an example where, okay, you figured out your dishwashing in your back of house, but you have to make sure your reusable dishware is front and center front of house, particularly in a buffet environment. We've often gone into places that will have a small stack of reusable dishware and then there'll be disposables everywhere. And of course, people are in a rush. So, and this is very, very common in employee dining, people are going to take what's closest. And that if that's a disposable dish, that's what they're going to take. So we really have, in many cases, are pushing our clients to hide those, to actually have people have to ask for them and only have reusables available front of house. So Claire gets all of the credit for this really fantastic image because we want to show people how much better you can do when you replace disposables with reusables. So when you have a lot of disposables, it's complicated. But when you have a lot of reusables, suddenly recycling becomes really, really simple. I think this is so powerful. But we can't always use reusable. So it is really important to actually try to find the best disposables available for the planet. We recommend fiber-based, fluorinated chemical-free, BPI certified, compostable dishware. But we recognize that even 100% fiber-based are not always easy to compost. We do tell our clients that if it is a very safe fiber-based dish, that even where there's plastic recycling, we are encouraging our clients to use fiber-based, biodegradable, compostable dishware, because we just know that plastics find their way into the environment despite our best intentions. And they're so damaging. So we've talked about signage. These are example recycling stations. Color coding, visual cues are really, really important. Consistency. Up above here on the upper right may not be the prettiest recycling station that we've seen, but we love that it prioritizes food waste in a food place. It has 2 openings for food waste, where it has 1 for trash, and also makes way for those liquids that we don't want to go down the drain. I pulled this in here because we're going to talk just a little bit about, food waste interventions, and we just can't stress enough that reducing food waste is the goal here. We don't get as many points for composting or making energy, because if you look at this chart, you can see that the economic value for reducing food waste by better inventory management or serving on smaller trays on a buffet, you're looking at over $2,000 a ton versus compost, which you're seeing at $3 to $4 a ton. And the same with your carbon impacts. You have 7 times the carbon benefits if you reduce food waste than if you process it as energy or compost. So we really want to remind people all the time that reduction is the game. Sorry. And when we talked a little bit about equipment, but here are just other examples of waste reduction equipment. And we're talking a lot about food today, but we get our clients to compact their cardboard, to compact their recycling and trash, to process organics on site, because it makes a huge difference in terms of trucks on the road to pick up waste. It saves you space in your places, and it can also save you, baling cardboard saves you staff labor time. So again, here are some examples of food. This is a little bit of a duplicate slide here, but of food technology. And one, the slurry pump here is actually a grinder that just moves waste to a central tank. So it devolumizes it, but then you can store much more on site. And this is called the SoluCycle. And their clients tend to get waste pickups every couple of weeks, where most of the people we work with who are putting organics in small containers are getting their waste picked up every day, which, as you can imagine, is much more expensive. And when we're processing our organics on site into fertilizer or compost, it's so great to have circularity. And here are some wonderful examples in Singapore of rooftop gardens in hotel spaces. And here's the Grand Hyatt. They're growing 30% of their herbs on site and doing some composting. And one Farrer hotel is growing 20% of all of its produce in what is an 11,000 square foot farm on site. And they are composting coffee grounds and eggshells. And it's just, these are great examples. Here is an example of the Kutekquat Hospital. And Quanchi can talk a little bit more about this later, but they actually have a food garden on site, but they really took a biomimicry approach to the space to incorporate agriculture and nature as part of a big focus on wellness in a hospital environment and creating spaces that help with healing, which is very, very cool. Oops. So I wanted to stress that when we're talking about volume reduction, it's real, and that it can make such a huge difference in urban places that have no space. So if you are composting or you are creating fertilizer with your organics, you can look at this. It's not the clearest slide here at the bottom, but you can see that over to the left here, the organics before we were using a biodigester took up this much space. And suddenly now in the loading dock, it's taking up. You can actually see the 4 organics toters right over here where my pointer is. And the same with cardboard and trash. You can save so much space. And our client, Claire, and I actually worked on this project together, and it's a large food incubation space, but you can see it's not a big loading dock. There's only 2 large truck bays. And then we can fit a box truck in the bay where we're storing some of our waste. And they just would not have been able to fit the material no matter what without volume reduction equipment. So once we've recycled, we've reduced, we've reused, we want to be tracking the benefits of what we're doing. So these are just some examples of how companies are tracking waste reduction. Over here on the left, tools like LeanPath and Winnow are being used in food service and hotels and corporate dining, universities to track daily food waste. We also spend a lot of time with our clients doing waste audits where you're actually weighing and separating everything, identifying contamination for whether it's for LEED certification or just to make sure they're on track. And then we also work with our clients using our daily waste tracking tool, which allows them to really stay on track, because if you can have up to the day updates on, is my waste going up or down? Am I recycling more? Did trash go up? You can actually make changes and retool to make sure that you stay on track to achieve zero waste. I think we're getting close. This is just an example report of taking that information, your diversion information. We run our data through a model in the US called the WARM model to help our customers know how much carbon their program that they are saving through their waste interventions. And then how does that translate to something people really understand, like cars off the road, or homes that don't have to be heated, or carbon sequestered by acres of forests, all kinds of cool things we can do to help our clients convey to their staff and their customers that the things that they're doing matter and they're making a difference. And also we popped in some resources for you all to use later. That was a big dump of information. So I'm looking forward to questions later. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Chris. If it's easy, maybe we could pop those resources in the chat. I don't know if that's easy.
Let me get out of my sharing and then I'll do that.
Thank you so much. So now we're moving on to the panel discussion part of the event. And if people have questions, I see quite a few there, but please put them in the Q&A. But I was going to start with a few questions of my own, starting with Hakan, just asking what motivated Rosewood Hotel Group. You've got hotels all over the world. What motivated you to prioritize reducing waste?
Thank you, Claire, and hello to everyone. Yes, of course, being a multinational global hotel company, we recognize that our operations and our activities create a lot of lot of waste and also use a lot of resources. So we, as part of our overall corporate social responsibility strategy, strategies in general, in addition to energy, water, and carbon emissions, we thought the waste was a big area that we needed to focus on, because we do generate a lot of waste as an industry. So for that reason, we started to work with, actually with Foodprint Group this year to set up our own waste management program, and hopefully to go to the zero waste goal. But what we set out for ourselves for the next 5 years is to divert our waste from landfill by 70%. So that's our goal. But of course, as part of that, as you would know, also from related to the hotel industry, single-use plastics is a big concern in the hotel industry too, especially in hotel guest rooms. We all know that a lot of toiletries are using single-use plastics, and also water bottles and various other guest amenity packaging materials are single-use plastics. So, and also in the food and beverage, food service, we do use some of those single-use plastics. So that was a goal that was set some time ago already to eliminate all single-use plastics in our hotels, and we are very close to achieving that goal, especially for the guest rooms and for food and beverage operations. And as part of our waste management program with the Foodprint Group, we have done quite a lot with our hotels in preparation for the waste management program. And one of the key reasons that motivated us was that every hotel does quite a lot of stuff on their own for waste management or recycling or composting or similar types of handling waste and reducing waste. But we wanted to have a consistent, unified approach across our hotels and across the globe. So for that reason, we wanted to get into a new program and set this goal for ourselves, which would be hopefully a minimum of 70% in 5 years, and hopefully reach that and achieve zero waste. According to Chris, 90% or above, I guess, would be considered zero waste. So hopefully we get to that soon.
That's great. That's great that you have such high goals, and interesting that single-use plastic came before zero waste. Actually,
Exactly.
I'd like to follow up on that to just ask, you're working in so many different cities globally. Other thing, I know you're not in Singapore, but you are in Hong Kong. Are there things you see in Hong Kong that are different compared to other cities, or?
Yeah, I think some of those Simon already touched on about Hong Kong and some of the challenges that Hong Kong has. But I believe in addition to maybe those unique challenges of being a very densely populated city, as well as maybe not having too much of land for landfills, but I believe there are so much opportunity and maybe so many positives in Hong Kong, especially with regards to having well-established institutions, a very highly educated population that would really try to embrace and implement all of these goals and strategies for waste management in general. But at the same time, there are so many social enterprises that contribute into these efforts. For example, some of our local hotels in Hong Kong currently are working with certain social enterprises in reducing their food waste, or speaking of circularity, working with certain organizations in giving away some of the used or damaged linen or fabrics for those to be later on turned into new materials. And at the same time, work, as you know, the urban farming or some of these herb gardens in city environments and also in resort environments have been done quite a lot as a solution for using the space availability, and also reducing, of course, our purchase of these herbs or other products and plants from far away locations where you would have so much carbon emissions to bring them in for transportation, and also use a lot of packaging. So these urban farms help quite a lot, not only in your own business and your food and beverage operations for providing those ingredients and materials, but at the same time, some of the excess product could be donated to the local community and the people in need. So one other social enterprise that our hotels are right now exploring to do some projects is also use of excess paper and or paper waste, because that paper waste could be also turned into recycled paper, and that recycled paper could be used both in our hotels as well as it could be donated to the organizations that might need them. So we are exploring some of these, and we do have some projects going on locally. So I wanted to mention this because there are so many of these organizations who are very eager to support the businesses in Hong Kong, and I think there is so much opportunity to do and for reducing waste, as well as supporting the circularity and circular economy.
Yeah, that's a great point, and there's a question from the audience. I want to follow up on that, but first, it's kind of an ideal segue into some of Chi Young's work, which does integrate a lot of nature-based solutions. Chi Young is an architect and a landscape architect, really into biophilia and integrating nature-based solutions, including greenery for treating water, for circularity. So Chi Young, how do you see these opportunities developing in Singapore? And I know there's a lot of horticultural waste being composted. Do you see possibilities for more circularity, either in your building projects or in more neighborhood scale?
Yes, indeed, Claire. Thanks, and hello everyone, and from Singapore. Well, Christina has kindly presented Kotik Hospital, where we actually use it's actually linked to a garden, and all the garden waste and food waste is actually used as part of the compost system for a community farm, and the organic food is again plowed back into the hospital's organic dining system, right? So it's quite fun over there. But I think we've actually moved ahead. In fact, since yesterday's discussion, Gardens by the Bay, which CPG was the architect, was the master planner and architect of record, receives about up to 50 million visitors up to today since it opened in 2012. And as of last year, SP Group actually set up a system, a 6-meter long kind of gas combustion system that basically uses food waste because of the visitorship of more than 7 million a year to basically create a heat for the F&B, and also the biochar that will be used for the gardens. So in fact, it has started to become more than just plant waste. It has become food waste, and Singapore is getting a bit better as we understand how to use plastics. Our plastics are being used now for road construction, where we need a lot of stability. And at the same time, I think where possible, certain types of plastics that can be part of the thermal kind of generate thermal heat and things like that, and using it for desiccant cooling, etc., is actually being used.
Great, that's really interesting to hear. And yes, I know Singapore does has really high levels of construction waste being recycled as well.
Yes, construction waste. Yes,
products.
Certainly.
But yes.
And the next step we are actually moving towards is design for disassembly, where the modular systems in Singapore are being designed such not necessarily a prefabricated, pre-finished volumetric construction size, but also now in smaller modules, so that it could be used to repurpose old buildings, etc. So it doesn't become waste that we turn into a green concrete or things like that.
And it also makes it easier to retrofit spaces, because we did have a question like, it's all very well for a new building, but many of these for existing buildings, often if you want to retrofit to add equipment, it's great if buildings are designed for that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, indeed, Claire. Yes, and finally, I think at the community level, we, the Housing Development Board and CPG, we are researching different ways of creating pop-up areas in green community clusters and hubs, so that the community gardens become pop-up spaces for activities, wellness, exercise, plenty of natural ventilation and sunlight, etc. So these will be certainly useful in terms of the clustering concept, especially in the wake of COVID, where sometimes clustering is the best. You don't have to travel very far. It's easy to trace. At the same time, it's one stop for everybody.
Yeah, and you can, as you were saying, you incorporate composting and urban agriculture in those
all
spaces.
of them in one place. Yep, and also designed for disassembly, so it can be pop-up, it can grow depending on the events you want to create over there.
Yeah.
So instead of creating permanent spaces, more integrated spaces in nature, I think that would be our goal over time.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much. And I love that they also keep communities healthy. It's health from what you eat, and you're healthier if you're composting and growing food. So linked to one of the questions in the audience and what Hakan was just saying about connecting with social enterprises, I actually wanted to ask Chris. Graham wanted to hear about the role and impact of new platforms such as Too Good To Go, which is an app that links grocery stores and a wide range of food and beverage operators selling excess food to the public. I think Hakan was also talking about that kind of entity. So just hearing what you think about that.
Sure. So Too Good To Go has recently come to the United States. I say recently, within the last year, just in time for COVID. But they have been doing really well. We have more than one client who uses the Too Good To Go service. It is a service that helps connects people with end of day discounts on really fun food. So some of your favorite places that might seem a little expensive, at the end of the day, they will package up different items and post on Too Good To Go that they're available, and you can purchase them at a significant discount. And their most popular concept is this idea of kind of a grab bag, where one of our clients is a very high scale bakery. They have all kinds of delicious cookies and cakes and different things, and they can just assemble wonderful little bags of what's left at the end of the day, and you don't know what you're going to get, but you're never going to be disappointed. So I think that's worked really well. There are other tools, for example, Rescuing Leftover Cuisine here is a not-for-profit that uses online technology to connect volunteers who then go to restaurants and pick up leftovers and bring them to very nearby pantries, food banks, and places. I think technology is playing a huge part in food waste reduction.
And we actually have Dana from Rescuing Leftover Cuisine in the audience here, who,
oh,
so
really?
I will move to her question. She has asked two. Are you seeing more one-way single-use kegs? And is there a recycling solution for those? Is her first question. Single-use kegs. Are you seeing more one-way single-use kegs? for drinks?
So what we have seen is a couple clients thought they were doing something very sustainable by getting wine through these kegs that are, quote, recyclable. They're made of plastic and paper with a little metal nozzle piece, and you have to separate it all, and you can recycle pieces. And we just turned around and said, why not an aluminum keg like they've been using forever? Why would we do this? So we have been seeing more solutions that we're not super excited about that kind of a solution, to have something disposable when you can have something infinitely reusable as the substitute.
Great. And her second question was, do you favor fiber packaging for takeout if there is no composting available and it goes to landfill?
Over plastic, we do. I don't think that's everybody's. I don't think everybody in the sustainability world agrees with that, but we do because of the toxicity of plastic material, and when it breaks down in the environment, it has such negative effects. And we just have a crisis. I mean, it's not just in the ocean, it's everywhere. We're eating a credit card worth of plastic, every one of us breathing it every week. And so it's just, it has to go. And so that's our stance. And something that will break down is fiber. I mean, fiber breaking down is not going to create the same kind of methane that meat or other things in the landfill. Well, we don't love it, but we are seeing really interesting solutions that are fiber-based for cups. Part of the big Starbucks challenge over the last couple of years that Closed Loop Partners ran, solutions from all over the world popped up, and two companies had paper-based products that were 100% fiber. They didn't have a plastic coating, they were bonded, and so they were both recyclable and compostable. And they're just coming to market now, but we see hope for, if I can get my coffee in something paper that is still recyclable, even though it's had coffee in it, that would be a huge, recyclable as paper, that would be a huge step forward, particularly where there isn't composting infrastructure.
Thank you so much. And I just see in the chat, I'm confusing two Danas. Those questions were from Dana from Plastic Free Seas, not Dana from Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. But they were good questions. Thank you. And I had another question for you myself, which is, I love the fact that you've worked in food systems at kind of every place in the chain. You started by training as a chef, you worked for the New York State Agriculture Department, you've worked with community scale food systems. Where do you see the most potential to getting for the circular economy and for circularity?
Well, there's no one who's going to deny that reducing food waste is the most important thing that we can do right now. Drawdown, which is a global effort, hundreds of scientists came together to come up with the top interventions for reversing climate change, and reducing food waste was started out as 3, but has since moved up to #1 on the list. So that is where we go. But from a food systems perspective, I think it's such a tangible, everybody eats, we're all part of it. And I feel like from farm to plate, we can't really fix one thing without fixing another. You know, it's harder. We're never going to eliminate plastics in a vacuum. We're thinking about the food we serve, and we've had people call and say, but styrofoam is the one thing that absorbs all the moisture. And if I'm sending fried, French fries home with takeout and delivery, what else is going to do? We have to think about everything. And with our food system, we're thinking about jobs along the way. We're thinking about, because our foods, there's nothing like COVID-19, I think, to really expose everything that's not working from farm to plate with our food system, in terms of people having to go to work being the most at risk, people who are the lowest paid in the working world, having to go to work as essential workers, and in many cases being underprotected for the amount of waste. If we're throwing away at least 30% of all the food we grow globally, and people are starving, 1 out of 9 people are hungry, all the things are broken. And I think what's exciting though is when things are broken, innovation is popping up all over the place. And we have the Too Good to Go's, we have technology thinking about food waste, we are solving for food waste, we have people innovating around reusable service providers. can our dishes be like linens in restaurant environments where if we don't have enough dishwashing capacity, a third party is going to drop off dishes, they're going to pick them up and wash them and drop off clean ones. I mean, we're innovating all over the place, and all of those things are creating jobs too. So I think, I don't know, I think that was a long-winded way to say there are so many opportunities in the food system. If we're going to only do one thing, it's going to be reduce food waste. But if you're interested in so many different areas of sustainability, of social justice, of, you know, of everything. I mean, we're transporting everything. There isn't anything we don't touch with our food system. There's a place for you to fix something here.
Yeah, I think that's actually what makes it so inspirational, because once you start doing the right thing, you buy the local food, you use the reusable dishes, you regenerate the local soils, it all ties together, and the positive effect kind of multiplies.
And I think, you know, Hakan can really speak to this. We love food. That's why we work in, we don't just work in food because it's broken. We work in it because it's also our favorite place to be. And Hakan, maybe you could speak a little bit to the fact that you are so customer facing in your places, and Rosewood is taking advantage of the opportunities they have to educate their guests. So they're going to learn about these things in your places, and hopefully, you know, take some of them home.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in our hotels, especially the resort hotels, maybe have a little bit more opportunity in doing so, because the guests stay there much longer, and they really become part of the whole operation while they're also enjoying their time in our hotels. And we do have quite a lot of also educational programs for also children. With our Explorers Club for children. They learn about food, they learn about farming, they learn about plants and vegetables, fruits. That is a nice part of course, that program. But yes, absolutely for our restaurants and food programs, our food and beverage colleagues are very, very creative, and they work with local producers and purveyors, and they prepare food with, or dishes with seasonally available ingredients, and yeah, use of all these sustainably produced products. I think they deliver a great experience to our guests, and then they speak with our guests in explaining what those are. And absolutely, our guests love our food programs and what they eat, and I believe they are happy with also how the food is prepared and where the ingredients are coming from in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I wanted to ask if you would have advice for other businesses or hotel groups who are just trying to tackle this.
Yeah, with regards to, especially because our focus is food waste, I believe, and everyone would join me, I'm sure, in first talking about preventing food from being a waste. So reducing food waste at its core. So first of all, let's not create the waste, meaning the dishes, the food that we prepare could be, speaking of design, they could be designed at an early stage so that the waste is minimal, or there is no waste. It could start with, of course, the food itself, but also it could have the packaging aspect later on. The materials that we use in serving that food becomes also important for waste. But with regards to the food that we consume, I believe, especially in our food and beverage in our culinary operations, our chefs they design their dishes, or should design their dishes in a way that there is nothing really left on the plate. So they should be putting on those dishes what's being really liked and consumed by guests, so that when the dishes go back, they're empty, hopefully. So there is no, they're consumed, and there is no waste. Also, portion sizing is very important. If you do not necessarily right size the portions, and if they're too large, then there will be, of course, again, food wasted. In preparation of that food, again, what is the waste while you're preparing that food? Are we wasting half of that? Let's give an example, that apple that we want to put maybe in a dessert, or similar preparation techniques and also strategies could be used to even prevent food from being wasted in the first place. Later on, of course, with the packaging materials, as well as the products and materials that we use to serve. Although in our hotels, typically, of course, we don't have these paper products or throwaway type of materials and service materials that we would use, but still there is a to-go aspect of some of the restaurants that we have. They do still, of course, especially during the pandemic, a lot of, as you know, restaurants use quite a lot of materials and for packaging and for deliveries too. So we need to be very, very careful about those and use biodegradable products for those packaging materials, especially while we're serving the food or sending the food away. So these are some of the maybe preparation and techniques and elimination or reduction of food waste techniques. But at the same time, I think hotels and hotel designers and or restaurant designers or restaurant hotel owners, operators, they should really work with food waste consultants or waste consultants in general, because I think it's a very niche expertise. Not everyone is really very good at or very knowledgeable at some of these design techniques for waste management areas or waste and recycling areas that we have in our hotels or in other buildings. And I've been in hotel design and construction industry for a long time myself. And yeah, even though we do have in many of our hotels, relatively well-designed spaces, it sometimes feels like it's like you're starting from scratch every time. And then when you have different architects, different food service consultants, and they all, or kitchen consultants, they all come together, but do not necessarily sometimes have the same, let's say, understanding or capabilities of designing a space, waste and recycling space. I think that needs to improve a little bit. So for that, I would recommend, again, restaurant and hotel operators to work with waste management consultants, so that all of these, as Christina earlier showed and you showed in your presentation and your slides, they need to be, I think, carefully planned in advance, so that we are prepared and we are ready for what's to come during our operations. So
yes, I think
that would be my recommendation to a lot of the hotel and restaurant operators.
Yes, I think that's a great recommendation. And as an architect myself who spent 18 years in practice before I really ever thought about waste, I have to admit that it's not something that architects are taught very much. We're taught a lot about energy and water reduction and integrating greenery and for the biophilic benefits. But I mean, I think Chi-Yung, you could probably agree with me there. This is not something that is regularly taught to architects.
Totally, Claire. And in fact, this is one part that, as architects become more social conscious, woke, so to speak, I think, as Christina said, there are so many fringe benefits from just thinking through this issue, and the messaging has to be correct, I suppose. It has to be a simple language. I was very happy when you started placing, instead of organic waste, you put there composting. It's the message is very direct in the signage, Christina, and Grace. I think and Claire, and I love that. I think that is always lacking in the way we create recycling and all that. Just like any sustainability, or even nature-based solutions, sometimes because we take such solutions for granted because they are passive, we tend not to bring it up as the branding and the design of the building, okay, when we approach the brief. So if that is already part of it, just like in the case of Singapore, we have Solaris, which is a building that is a green mark and platinum and very sustainable, has a 1.5 kilometer spiral green over the building, that collects rainwater, etc. It becomes the aesthetics of the building. It becomes the brand of the building and the company. So they will never discard these kind of features. So the question now is that how do we create this kind of experience and branding as part of the design? As buildings become more focused on, as design becomes more focused on experience, like Hakan said, don't waste the expensive apple. You get the best organic apple ever, but get everybody have a kind of a tasting menu, so everybody gets a beautiful slice of it. None of it is wasted, right? So it's the same thing for architecture, I suppose. We want to basically bring up all these aspects and put into the features that the users of the spaces could experience. Yeah, this will be really part of the in terms of how we create the brief, how we start to, instead of just again from top down and scaring everybody about about waste and pollution, etc. Make it something that is experiential and make it work with us. So
yeah,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
If I may add also a few things, Claire, about
Yes.
some of the non-environmental aspects of or benefits of organic waste or food waste recycling or reuse. In the past, I had some other experiences with regards to waste management, and we had to do all waste audits. And during the waste audits of, let's say, 5 hotels, we identified that actually most of the waste that was being hauled was food waste, and 50 to 60% in some locations of that overall waste was food waste. So when you think about it, and you do pay quite a lot of money to waste haulers, especially in some well-developed countries where cost of living or cost of everything is very high, and such services also become your operating cost, and they become an important part of your operating cost. And when you process food waste on site, either through dehydration or the digesting or composting, then you basically avoid sending that food waste to the landfill with those waste trucks. And you not only, of course, the environmental benefit is still there, especially with regards to not filling the land or with eliminating carbon emissions because of trucks going back and forth. But at the same time, really, you're not paying for that hauling, and that's a lot of savings operationally, and it's good business too. And it's not just for the environment, but it's also for the bottom line of your operation, of your business entity. So I think that's great. And one more point I wanted to make, although it may be a repetition, but I think our colleagues in the industry should also establish contacts with these other organizations, especially for food donations or these food waste processing organizations or plants, and because once you have the food waste or food that could still be consumed later on and you can donate them, then I think you're already, again, handling that food waste intelligently, and then it's being used for something good. So those connections and those relationships with various organizations, I think, would definitely help your operation and handling that food wasting that comes out of your operation. So I think those would be the additional recommendations from my side to our colleagues.
Yes, all good ones. And I see some questions about the economics as well. So I don't know if Chris, if you want to address that, like I know you do an economic analysis the whole time. Is it normally a case that you can pay back the quickly or save money in these cases?
Well, depending on, I mean, you will definitely pay. We have lots of examples where clients are paying for investments in equipment to process waste on site, and whether that's food waste or even bale their cardboard in a 3 to 6 month time frame. A donations program may save you on hauling. You are putting a little more time into it. But what we tell our clients is the savings of a donation program will come later, because once you're actually separating it out in the kitchen and you have to package it and refrigerate it, you're paying a lot more attention to what you're wasting. So what we're hoping is that donations tracking also starts to move into inventory management, and you're thinking about menu planning and you're doing things differently, and that's big savings. Here in the US, the EPA estimates that food waste costs about $1.17 a pound. Now that's an apple peel, or that's a fancy piece of salmon, and they've come up with an average, and they worked actually with Lean Path to get there. But so imagine if you've got prepared food on a nice buffet, that's not $1.17, that could be $2, that could be, I mean, that could be a lot more. And if you start to do that math, you're thinking about, I'm saving the prep time, I'm saving in the food costs, I'm saving on the hauling. You look at every step of the way that you're going to save by reducing that waste, and it starts to really add up.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. I think as we're kind of getting to the end here, I would like to kind of turn to Simon and ask you first. What do you think the next steps should be to accelerate zero waste design for food service spaces in Hong Kong? And or what are the particular challenges that need to be overcome?
Thank you, Claire. I think we haven't paid enough attention to zero waste design in Hong Kong, and we've been witnessing a lot of companies from the business sector, including F&B, including hospitality, and also property developers. They are now exploring opportunities to reduce waste through design, which is great. And they are having different collaborations with social enterprises and green groups. I think Hakan already confirms that. So what I would like to say is please continue to do so, do more, try to learn, try to get more experience, and inspire your peers to do the same. Now, because right now, I think the government, as you can tell from my presentation at the very beginning, they are on the right track, but they pay more attention in terms of how to enhance and build up the infrastructure for collection and also for treatment of food waste. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but they haven't paid attention to design and other opportunities, to help the situation. So I think the next step probably is to get the government on board and reach out to them and make sure that they also consider this as part of the strategy. And to do that, it would take time. And that's why I'm saying for the business sector, please continue to do so. Don't wait for the government for any policy support at this point, because what you're doing is already great, and it will help others to understand why this is important. But together with government's involvement later on, I think that we will have a chance to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That makes a lot of sense. And the Hong Kong government aren't the only people who don't see the importance of design. Every single zero waste plan I've looked at really just talks about infrastructure, behavior, and policy, and never mentions design. But that's why we have the guidelines, and that's why we have the Center for Zero Waste Design. And that's why so many people pay attention to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I'd like to ask Shiva the same question actually for Singapore.
No, fantastic. Well, firstly, I think fantastic conversation. So thank you for that. And thanks for all the questions to all the attendees. So Claire, I think in Singapore, there is definitely over the last couple of years, heightened awareness of the waste issue because of the campaigns and awareness and outreach programs by the government primarily. I would credit that. But also because of the food production focus last year. Food waste was the year before that. I think a lot of organizations are making this connection between being able to process food waste on site and link it to food production on site as well. So that connection, I think, is actually sort of catalyzing a lot of action. I see, especially in commercial buildings. That's awesome. I think two things, just to sort of accelerate this process further. I think we need to develop these case studies, put an economic value to it, and socialize those case studies very aggressively so that others can learn from the experience and the knowledge and innovation diffusion happens. Second thing is I would love to collect more data and arm designers and architects with data that can actually help them design better, because we're talking about design today. Because in my interviews with facility managers in 2019, one of the complaints was that buildings are undersized. And you said that also in your work, Claire, even in our last discussion. So if we can develop your waste calculator and arm the designers and architects with better data, I think that would be amazing. So these two things, case studies to socialize and diffuse knowledge better, faster, and arm the designers with the right amount of data. These are the two things I think would really help.
Yeah, and I think what we hear everywhere, your point about the waste calculator to calculate the area. We heard this in Hong Kong and Singapore and New York City from developers, that you have to give it as free zoning floor area to have more space for waste. So it requires the government to do that. But yes, it is an important point. And I actually would like to ask Chi Young, because I know you do a lot of work with government agencies as well in Singapore. What do you think needs to happen?
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Shiva. Really, I think you literally took the words out of my mouth. You know, the great thing about Singapore evolving from a garden city to a city in nature, and part of the nature being food production, has actually kind of closed the loop, which is really important. You know, basically coating grace where you want to keep the nutrients at the spot where it is. You know, so that we could actually recycle it and reuse it, right? So I think that part needs to happen, and listening from to Simon, actually is very difficult just to rely on government, you know, to create plans and do a business model and calculate the volumes. In fact, it takes forever. A lot of times, especially organic waste, is actually very easy to be a more communal based activity, because you know you can literally just plow your vegetable waste into the soil and it becomes, you know, fertile, right? So but you need to create spaces for it. So I think the good thing about Singapore is that we have a very strong policy under what they call the LEAF, where they have free GFA for green roofs, balconies, etc. It's very unusual, you know, and this is the reason Singapore is so green. So you know, and this is actually driving what Shiva is saying, you know, this growing in situ, right? Hunting and farming in situ. So maybe this policy could be very useful even in the context of Hong Kong, but was possibly quite tough because of the typhoons and all that. But yeah, okay. So these are some of these ideas that could be used. Okay, and to leave everyone behind with some quotes is that, you know, since I'm a nature-based solution person, if you understand the life of the Pacific salmon, it basically travels up to the barren mountains and die there because they are bringing nutrients there. So you know, nature is like that, right? It's part of the system. So we should kind of learn from it. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. I love that ending. I was just hearing that salmon can recognize the taste of one drop of the water from their natal stream, and that's how they find their way back often. But yes, and they found nitrogen from salmon in trees, so they really are part of the ecosystem. That's a great thought to end on. Chris, any parting thoughts before we close? I would like, Shiva, can we save the chat and any questions we didn't get to, so I will be able to respond by email?
Absolutely. I mean, I can save the chat. I'm trying to see if I can save the Q&A tab as well. I'll try and figure it out in the meantime.
If not, screenshots will do. Thank you. And so, yes, Chris, anything you would like to end on before we close?
I would just like to end on a plug for the zero waste design guidelines local process in both Hong Kong and Singapore, because the collaborative part of it that brought all these different organizations together, that brought municipal government to the table, agencies that never talked to each other about waste, but all kind of touched it in different ways. I mean, it was just so valuable to have the conversation. We love the fact that we actually have the guidelines themselves, but I almost think the conversations were as valuable as the output, and hope that you all have the opportunity to do that.
Yes, I would echo that. The energy in the conversations we had, the people who made connections that they have continued to use to this day, was just so valuable. So thank you all so much. That was a great conversation. Thank you, Hakan. Thank you, Ji-Young, Simon, Shiva. I really enjoyed it, and it was great to hear all your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
And yes, it has been recorded on FaceTime, and Shiva will be following up, and we will try and answer any other questions.
Thank you. Have a
Enjoy
great
the
day.
end of your
Bye.
Earth Week, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.